Hi everyone, I'm Jen. I'm a chiropractor here at Evolve Chiropractic in Swan River. Today we're going to be working through a mobility class. So what is mobility and why is it important? Mobility is the ability to take our joint, a specific joint, through its full range of motion with control. And it's important because we need to be able to get into certain positions for everyday life, such as getting down into a squat to sit down onto the toilet or the couch, or bending over to pick something up. The mobility will vary between different joints in your body, especially if you've had an injury or if you've played a one-sided sport. Today we're going to work through some foam rolling, which will address some of the soft tissues that contribute to mobility, and then we're going to go through some active drills. Our brain gets a lot more feedback when we do things actively as opposed to sitting in a passive or a static stretch or having someone work on us. When we move actively, it just lights our brain up a little bit more. So we're going to work through some foam rolling first, as I said, to address the soft tissues, and then we'll go through some dynamic joint mobility drills. So mobility is more than just flexibility. There are going to be various sources that play into a joint's range of motion, from neuromuscular control, input from the brain, flexibility of the soft tissues, and then restrictions through the joint. So you can either work with a lacrosse ball if you have one, a foam roller. If you don't have either of those, sometimes people use a rolling pin. If you have a stick that has the two handles on the end with the rolly bits in the middle, that'll work too. We're going to start actually from the ground up today, so we're going to start with the feet. So I'm going to use a lacrosse ball, and just a quick little drill that you can do just to kind of get an idea of how important mobility work is you can try and keep your legs nice and straight, so knees are not locked, but they're straight, and you're going to see whether you can reach the floor. We're going to take a minute now, so just take note of where your hands were on your shins if you couldn't get all the way down. If you're already flat-handed on the floor, then you won't see much of a difference, but I promise it's still beneficial. So for working through the feet, I'm going to take the lacrosse ball, I'm going to place it on the inside of my right heel. So I want to be on the soft tissue here. The more pressure that I put on the ball, the more intense this is going to be. And I'm going to start by just rolling up and down. So working my way from heel up towards the toe. And then I'm going to shift over half a centimeter or so. And I'm going to slowly make my way across the foot outwards. If you feel any crinkly, crackly Rice Krispies in there, that's okay. A little bit of tenderness is okay, but if you have any shooting pain or like sharp electrical shock type pain, it means that you're on a nerve, so you probably want to move over just a little bit with the ball. You can also do this with a frozen water bottle, which is something that we recommend to a lot of our patients if they have foot pain or plantar fasciitis. So I'm just slowly working my way outwards towards that pinky toe, rolling from heel towards the toes. Once I've done that, I'm going to go back to the heel, and now I'm going to smash across the foot. And again, we're going to work our way moving horizontally from the heels up towards the toes. Again, little crinkly bits or tender bits are okay. You can even spend a little bit more time there. Excellent. So if your ball has rolled backwards like mine, you can bring it back sort of to the center of your mat or wherever you're working. And now I'm going to place the ball under the ball of my foot. I'm going to keep my leg straight, the one that I'm working on. I can bend the other knee. I'm going to bring my hands down to help with this drill. I'm going to wrap my toes around the lacrosse ball. And then I'm going to draw them back towards the ceiling. You might get a pretty intense stretch through the calf there. That's okay. Try and think about keeping your back as neutral as possible here. You can do this sitting in a chair as well. I'm just slowly working my way out towards my little toe. Good. I'm going to pull the toes up towards the ceiling one last time. Relax the foot. I'll come back up to standing by hinging the hips forward, and then we're going to repeat on the other side. So I'm starting at the heel, working my way up towards the toe, and then shifting over about half a centimeter, working my way out towards my pinky toe or little toe. Again, areas of tenderness or little crinkles are okay. Any sharp pain or zapping type pain, we definitely want to move or discontinue. Again, once I've gotten all the way out to the outer edge of my foot, I'm going to start back at the heel, and now I'm going to work across the tissues, moving from heel gradually up towards the toes. Good. You can slide your ball back to center. We're going to line the lacrosse ball or the bottle that you're working with up underneath the ball of the foot. I can bend my right knee to come down. I'm going to try and keep that left leg relatively straight. And we can wrap the toes over the ball with assistance from the hand. And then lift all the way up towards the ceiling. Wrap. Good. And then lift. And I'm slowly working my way with the ball out towards the little toe here. Good. When you've made it all the way, you can raise the toes up towards the ceiling, relax the foot, hinge your way back up to standing, and then step off of the ball. And now for our retest purposes, you can do the same thing. Legs stay relatively straight. You can come and try and bring hands down to the floor. Our feet are the input for a lot of information, and so just working on those tissues at the very base of our kinetic chain can have a huge difference. As you can see now, I can get my palms flat to the ground. You can continue working with the lacrosse ball if you like, or if you want to move to a foam roller, you can. We're going to shift to the calves now. So if you're using a foam roller, you're going to place it down on your mat or on the floor where you're working. You can do both calves at the same time, but I usually like to do one at a time because one is usually a little tighter than the other, just by nature of our single hand dominance. If foam rolling it is not enough to get a lot of pressure through there, you can also tack the calf down with the opposite leg, so you have a little bit of added weight. I'm going to roll basically from the middle of my Achilles tendon up to the top of the calf. I'm not going to roll behind my knee because there's important nerves and vessels behind there that we don't want to affect. So hands can come down behind you, chest is open, you can roll back and forth in a broad sweeping motion across the entire calf. And then we're going to do what's called tacking and flossing. So I'm going to keep my weight on the calf. I'm going to point my toes and then pull them towards my shin. I'll move up just about an inch or so. So I'm working my way from the ankle up towards the back of the knee. I'll roll over about an inch or so, and then same thing. Keep the weight on the calf, point the toes, pull the toes towards the shin. Okay, and you can shift your hips so that your foam roller doesn't get away from you. Again, roll over about an inch or so, point the toes like a ballerina, and then pull towards the shin, and then we'll repeat on the other side. So I'm going to attack my left calf down to the foam roller with my right, roll back and forth, broad sweeping motions from ankle to behind the knee or up to the knee. And then I'll drop my weight, work my way from ankle up towards the knee, roll over about an inch back and forth, keep the weight on the foam roller, point the toes, pull them towards the shin. If this is really tender, don't worry, that is normal. Good. There's a tight spot. Good. Point the toes like a ballerina. Pull them towards the shin. So now, as I mentioned, we're going to skip working behind the knees just because of all the important structures that run behind there. And we're going to move up into our hamstrings. So you can bring your foam roller up a little bit higher. For this one, you're definitely going to have to be off the ground. So hands are going to come down behind you. I'm going to lift my bum off the ground. So I'm sitting on top of the foam roller. I'm going to start with a couple of broad sweeps from knee up towards my glutes. And then we can do the same sort of thing. You can't tack and floss on the floor here, unfortunately, with a foam roller for your hamstrings, but you can do a little bit more focused, more intense rolls over just about an inch or so. And I'm working my way all the way up to the glutes here. Excellent. So when you've done that, for the glutes, it's really great to work with a lacrosse ball if you have one. If you have a foam roller, you can do the exact same thing. You just have to have your hands down behind you, obviously, to balance. So if I'm working with a lacrosse ball, if I'm working on my right glute, I'm going to have my right knee bent. I'm going to put the ball underneath the bulk of the tissue, so I don't want to be rolling over bone. Same thing with the foot here. If you get any zapping or burning or shocking or numbness or pins and needles type feeling down the leg or in the glute, you're probably just on top of a nerve, so you want to move over to the side. So what I'm going to do for the glutes is I can just kind of roll around over the soft tissue, see if I find any tender spots. If I do find a tender spot, I'm going to drop my weight there. I can drop the knee open to the side, so this is that tacking and flossing like we were doing with the foam roller. You can also extend the hip, point the heel away, pull the toes towards the shin, and bring it back in. And this will probably be very tender. Most of us have lots of trigger points in there. So you can move the ball around. I wouldn't spend more than about 30 seconds to a minute working each area, because you can get sort of a reflexive spasm or tightening if you spend too long in one spot. Let's find one more bit here. There's lots of them in there for me. Good. And then I'm just going to repeat on the opposite side. So again, I'm going to roll around, kind of that broad sweeping trigger point detector type motion. So when you find a tender spot, you can drop your weight there. Again, you can drop the knee out to the side and bring it in like opening and closing a book. And then you can extend through the hip, drive that heel away, pull the toes towards the shins. I know lots of people that actually take lacrosse balls to work with them and do this while they're sitting in their office chair, if they're on a conference call. I guess if you're working from home on Zoom as well, that's also an option. Again, you just want to moderate how much time you're spending on it each day, just so you don't get any reflexive tightening. Then you go into that open book, tacking and flossing here. This isn't always the most pleasant while you're doing it. It can be a little bit tender, but I promise it usually feels better afterwards. I'm going to switch back to the foam roller for rolling the spine. So we will start with the low back. So for this one, I'm going to line the foam roller up right against my back. My knees are bent. I'm going to cross my hands across my chest. If you're not comfortable lifting your hips off the ground, that's fine. You can kind of roll back and forth here. But you get a bit more bang for your buck if you can lift your glutes. You can also roll side to side on the foam roller to get some of those tissues that run beside the spine. Okay, and then moving up to the mid-back, same sort of thing. You start with kind of those broad sweeping motions. Arms crossed. You can go all the way up to your shoulders. If you have a ponytail, be careful, or a hooded sweater. You don't want it to get stuck underneath your foam roller. And then we can roll back and forth, side to side, as we did with the low back. And then you can actually start just at the bottom of your rib cage. You can either keep your hands crossed across your chest, or you can bring your hands up overhead as you work through this drill. My neck is going to stay nice and neutral. I'm going to hinge back over the foam roller and come back up. You probably heard a couple cracks there. That's normal. Especially as you're working in around the base of the shoulder blades. If you have some shortness of breath, that's normal as well. There's just a lot of crossing fascial layers and muscle in there. I'm going to do just one more. Excellent. Again, if you have a ponytail, make sure it's not stuck underneath your foam roller before you roll back up to sitting. And then we're just going to flip to our front chain here. So we're going to move into our quads. Again, you can do this with a lacrosse ball or a foam roller. I'll show you with the foam roller, and I like to work one quad at a time. Again, one's usually tighter than the other. I usually offset my foam roller to the side that I'm working on, just so that it's not so awkward for the opposite leg. So you can come down onto your elbows. We want to keep a little bit of tension through our core here. We don't want our belly dropping towards the ground. I just have my other knee out to the side like this so that I can roll back and forth without it getting in the way. I'm going to start down at the base or down towards the knee, lower end of my quad, and we'll start with those broad sweeping strokes with the foam roller. And then this one's usually a little bit unpleasant. We're going to go into that tacking and flossing. So you'll roll over about an inch or two, and then you're going to bring heel to bum, and then straighten the knee. And we'll work our way from knee up towards the pelvis. Just like the back of the knee, we don't want to roll over the kneecap. We don't want to do any damage there or affect any of the capsular tissues. And again, we're keeping tension through the core here so that our belly is not drooping towards the ground. So you can work your way all the way up to the hip. And don't be alarmed if that's quite tender, as I said. Okay, and then we'll just repeat on the opposite side here. So you can bring your hands down to the ground. We'll offset the foam roller to the opposite side. And then same deal, we're going to start down towards the knee. Broad sweeping strokes over the quad. And the muscles on the front of the thigh. And then we'll go into that tacking and flossing. So starting down towards the knee, roll over an inch or two, and then bring heel to bum. And don't be surprised if you end up in a completely different spot on your mat or in your room from where you started, just because you are rolling back and forth and the foam rollers do move. So the drill would be the exact same if you used a lacrosse ball. It's going to probably be a little more tender if you use a smaller implement like a lacrosse ball or a golf ball, just because there's a smaller focus of pressure. So I would start with the foam roller if you've never rolled your quads before. We are going to move into our adductors or our inner thigh muscles next. So for this one, you're going to put your foam roller on about a 45-degree angle. Again, we're going to work one leg at a time. The leg that I'm not working is going to come out to the side so it's not in the way. And then the opposite inner thigh is going to come down to the foam roller. Again, tension through the belly here so that it's not drooping. So you're going to roll back and forth. Again, that broad sweeping motion to start. And then for the adductors, you can roll over about an inch or two. There's two different drills that you can do to tack and floss. So keeping your weight on the foam roller, you can extend or straighten the knee and bend it. The other thing that you can do is you can twist from the hip like this. But notice that my whole leg is twisting as one unit. What we don't want to see is you twisting or torquing your knee if you're doing this, okay? And again, you can work your way from the soft tissue just above the knee. You don't want to be on the knee joint itself, up towards the pelvis. You can straighten the knee. You can do your twist or smash, as people call it, and or both. This is another area that's often pretty tender. If you're doing this with a lacrosse ball, you want to elevate it probably on a yoga block or a pillow or a couple of books, just so that you're not trying to get that inner thigh right against the ground, because that's pretty hard for most of us. We're going to switch over to the other side. So again, broad sweeping strokes to start. And then starting with the soft tissue just above the knee, not on the knee joint, rolling over an inch or two, extending the knee and bending, and then doing our smash. Good. So with regards to the pace of foam rolling, you can do it as kind of a recovery activity. Some people do it after they work out to try and decrease muscle soreness post-workout. Some people like to do it before. So if you are doing your foam rolling before you work out, you want to kind of go at a faster pace just to get your nervous system amped up so that you're ready to work out. the last thing that you want to do is get yourself nice and relaxed and all your tissues loosey-goosey and then try to generate tension for squats or deadlifts or something like that. So I'm going to do one more on this side. Okay, and then we're going to move to rolling out our lats. So your lats are the big muscles that run, well, actually through most of your back. They attach into the upper arm here, but they do run all the way down and connect through fascia to the pelvis. I always joke that they're called like your LL Cool J muscles. So when you see those wings, those are your lats. So for this one, you're going to be side lying. You want to make sure that you are on the soft tissue though, that you're not rolling over your rib cage, because that will be very tender. Again, foam roller or lacrosse ball, both will work. So I'm going to have my hand above my head. And I'm going to start with those broad sweeping strokes. Again, a little bit of shortness of breath here because of tightness or tenderness can be normal. The next motion that I'm going to do to tack and floss is to bring my elbow down towards the foam roller. So pull it down and then reach up and away. I can move over about an inch or so. Pull the elbow down towards the foam roller. Reach up and away. Another drill that you can do with the lats is you can rotate the palm or the whole arm from the shoulder, so I'm not just flipping my wrist back and forth. We're rotating in and out through the entire length of the arm. Once you've foam rolled one lat, it's always interesting to see the distance or the length that you gain. We use our lats for a lot of things, and so when they get short and tight, they can actually decrease the length of your reach. So once you've rolled one side, give it a try and see if your arms are different lengths. We'll just move over to the other side here. Again, if it's your first time rolling your lats, you probably want to start with a foam roller. Or if you don't have a foam roller, a rolling pin will even work. A lacrosse ball might just be a bit too intense when you're first starting out. So starting with those broad sweeping strokes, and I'm going to roll over an inch or two. Elbow down towards the foam roller, reach up and away. That's our tack and floss for our lats. Good, and then through the whole length of the lat, you can also do that arm flip back and forth. Good. So now we've addressed most of the soft tissues. Let's see if my arms are the same length now, actually, I think we're pretty close now. Now that we've addressed most of the soft tissue, we're going to go into some active mobility drills. So for these ones, they're very slow, methodical drills. When I give pointers about keeping a heel on the floor or making sure your spine is stacked, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to those. We're not going to try and rush through it like CrossFit squats or anything like that. It's that slow focus connection that's going to help build that brain-body connection and also teach our body that we have control through the whole range of the joint. So our brain knows that it's safe to take advantage of that extra range once we've created it. So we're going to start with some shoulder clocks. I'm just going to move my foam roller out of the way here. And this one usually feels pretty good. If you're quite tight through the hips and low back for this one, you may want to use a yoga block or a pillow or something like that between the knees so that you can keep them stacked. So if you're using a block, it's going to sit just like this. I'm going to lay on my side. You can rest your head on the ground. If you want a pillow or a blanket or something under your head, that's completely fine too. I'm going to take my top hand, reach it past my bottom hand to create some length. Inhale, I'm going to draw a clock with the fingers, so I'm keeping them connected to the floor, all the way up and around. Obviously, you need a little bit of space for this one. We're going to do 5 of these on each side. So inhale, reach up. And you're going to exhale as you come back across your body. Lacrosse ball's getting away here. If this is actually a super easy exercise for you, you're able to keep your fingers on the ground the whole way through the entire clock, then you obviously don't need a prop. If it's easy even with the knees stacked, you can actually come into a staggered stance like this so that top knee is in front of the bottom one. But it should stay, I'm not quite there yet, it should stay on the ground, your fingertips all the way around the clock. One more on this side. Good. And then we'll just repeat on the opposite side. So again, I'm going to start with my knees stacked. Make sure I'm not going to take this block out. I'm going to inhale, reach the top hand, past the bottom, and then come up and around. Ideally, we want the fingertips to stay on the ground for the whole clock. So if you need to, put a prop between the knees like a pillow or a rolled up sweater or a blanket or a yoga block if you have one. Knees should stay on the ground as well. Just have one more here. So we're going to move into some spinal mobility next. So into a cat camel. Oh, the crossball's getting away again. Move this guy up here. So for this one, we're going to start with our shoulders stacked over top of our wrists and our knees underneath our hips. We want a nice strong connection with the ground here. So make sure that every finger is kind of planted and connected to the floor. Shoulders are away from the ears. I'm going to exhale, pull my belly button up to spine, round through the back. Drop the chin. Inhale, drop the belly towards the floor. Look towards the sky. Shoulders stay away from the ears. If you're feeling like some extra mobility here, as an added bonus, you can add a rib rotation. So you'll just bring ribs out to the side, round up towards the ceiling, drop belly towards the ground. If you're going to add that into each rep, just make sure you go in both directions. We're going to do 2 more cat camels. Exhale to round towards the ceiling. Inhale, drop your belly, look towards the sky. One more. Good. So we're going to come back to a neutral spine position. I'm going to turn around just so that you can see me here. And we're going to move into what's called a one-legged tactical frog. So this drill is for the adductors or inner thigh muscles. You can go from your hands, or if you have wrist pain, you can come down to the forearms. I'm going to extend one leg out to the side. You'll notice my toes are pointing forward. On my right side, my toes are tucked under, and I want to keep a nice neutral spine, which means I'm not going to let my bum tuck under with every rep. So from here, I'm going to inhale. As I exhale, I'm going to nice and slow push my hips back towards my heels. Underestimate your first rep, because this is usually a pretty tight area. Again, a little bit of stretching feeling is fine. We don't want any ripping or burning or tearing type feelings through here. So we're going to do 5 of these. And then I'm going to change my foot position. So when I'm back in my neutral position, so shoulders stacked over the wrist, I'm actually going to rotate those toes up towards the ceiling. This is going to bring this stretch a little closer to the groin. So underestimate your first rep again. Don't push back as fast or as far as you want to. You can go a little bit faster once you're used to doing this if you're doing this as a dynamic warm-up pre-workout. But if we're focusing on mobility, this pace is a pretty good one. If you have any knee pain, what you can do is flip your mat like this so you get a little bit of extra cushioning on that support leg. We're going to work through the other side now. So I'm going to bend that left knee and then draw the knee underneath the hip, tuck my left toes under, stick my right leg out to the side, toes pointing forward, and again, nice and slow. Hips push back towards the heel, low back stays neutral. I don't want my bum tucking under as I come back. Do one more here, and then I'm going to change position, so I'm just going to turn that toe up towards the ceiling, Again, underestimate that first rep. And you should feel this one closer to the groin once you turn your toes up. Good. So from here, I'm just going to turn back to face the other way so you get a better view. We're going to move into a downward dog. So connection will stay the same with the floor, palms pressed into the ground. I'm going to tuck the toes under and push my hips back into down dog. And from here, we're just going to start by walking out the heels. I'm going to do 10 of these on each side. Good. And then for a really great dynamic lower body exercise, I'm going to step that left foot forward in between my hands. I don't know why they call this a lizard, but they do. So my right hand is going to come down to the floor in line with my left foot. The closer my right hand gets to my instep, the more intense this is going to be. So I'm going to start just with my right wrist stacked underneath my right shoulder. I'm going to turn my chest, reach my left hand towards the sky, and then I'm going to bring my left elbow down to my instep. Inhale, I'm reaching up towards the ceiling. Exhale, I'm bringing that elbow to instep. We're going to do 5 of these on each side. 3. 2 more. Good. Then I'm going to drop that back knee and just let my left knee fall out to the side. So my foot's still flat on the ground. I'm just letting that left knee fall out, creating a little bit of space. We'll just hold this for 5 breaths. Good. So I'm going to bring one hand down on either side of that foot. I'll step back into down dog, shake the legs out a little bit, and then we'll repeat on the right side. So I'm just going to step that right foot up, left hand in line with the right foot. Right now I'm stacked underneath my shoulder. I'm going to open chest towards my thigh, and then bring my right elbow down to instep. Don't be alarmed if you have a difference between sides. Most of us do. Again, you can go a little bit faster than this, just making sure you hit all the points of performance if you're doing this pre-workout. I'm now going to drop that left knee down towards the floor and just let that right knee and hip fall out to the side. 5 breaths here. Excellent. So we're going to move into what's called a Kasich Squat. So this is going to challenge the stability through the hips, and then also kind of compound the work that we did on our adductors with the foam rolling and the tactical frog. So for your Kasich Squat, you're going to start in a nice long stance. We want to make sure that our glutes are engaged, so my bum is not sticking out behind me or way tucked under. I'm just in a nice neutral spine posture. Sometimes when we go into a sort of straddle stance, people tend to anteriorly tilt. So nice and slowly, I'm going to bring hands to heart center. If you prefer, you can grip to create tension to make sure that you engage your upper back and keep the shoulders open. I'm going to shift over to one side. Opposite toes come off the ground, but this heel stays down. Okay? We're going to do 5 of these on each side. You're trying to keep your chest up nice and high, and glide back and forth, side to side. Good, and then you can actually come to come to center and let the hands drop in just to a standing straddle. Excellent. I'll just place one hand flat on the ground. If you're left-handed, you can do the other side. It doesn't matter which one. I'm going to draw the leg through, and we're going to come into what's called a shin box position. So what that means is that the knee's at about 90 degrees, and I've just created a box with my shins. So this comes from sort of the martial arts world. So to start with, I'm going to get nice and long through the spine. I'm going to bend forward from the hip, and I'm just going to rotate back and forth. If you can get lower, that's fine, but the chest needs to stay proud. We don't want to see you rounded over that front knee. I'm just going to kind of glide back and forth, side to side, working my way outwards from the knee or from center. So as you're doing this stretch, you're probably feeling it through the outside of that front hip or whichever knee that you're leaning over. But now we're going to move into a hip flexor stretch. So I'm going to take my front foot and I'm actually going to move it back against my back thigh. So it's kind of blocking my left thigh or my back thigh from moving. I'm going to walk around to the outside of the front leg, drop down on the elbow when I start to feel a little stretch through the hip flexors here. If you squeeze that back bum cheek, that actually will intensify the stretch a little bit because they're opposing muscle groups, the hip flexors and the glutes. From here, I'm going to inhale, reach my top arm up and away, creating circles. We'll do 5 of these. And you should be feeling this through the front of the back hip. So for me, the front of the left hip. One more. And then we're going to do a torso rotation. So I'm going to bring my elbow in line with my shoulder. I'm going to open my chest towards the ceiling and then tuck forward or roll forward. Excellent. After that 5th or last one, you can press up onto the hands so you're off that back elbow and then walk around to center. We'll do the same thing on the opposite side. So I'm starting in that shin box position, getting nice and long through the spine, hinging through the hips. Just gliding back and forth here for a stretch. Good, and I'm going to block that back leg with the front foot. Walk around to the outside until I feel a slight stretch on that front of that back hip. Squeeze that back bum cheek, and then we'll go into our circle. So I'm going to inhale, reach up and away, and then the arm comes across the body. My eyes are just following that top hand. One more here. Good, and then we'll go into our torso rotations. Opening chest towards the ceiling, and then rolling forward. Good. Come up onto the hands, walk around back to center. So our shin box work is really great for loosening up the hips, but it's also great for hip control. So the next thing that we're going to do is some shin box switches, meaning we're going to rotate side to side. For this one, I want to make sure that your low back isn't kind of rounding. So when our hips are really tight or we don't have a lot of control through our hips, we tend to steal range through our low back. So if I can't get my hips up and over this way, what most people do is they'll round to get extra range through their back as they shift their legs. We don't want to do that. So if you're finding that's happening to you, you're rounding through the low back, pop your hands down behind you like this, lean back a little bit to create some extra space. But what we're going to do is we're going to lift, for me, the left leg. I'm going to bring it as far as I can without moving my right. And then I'll let the right knee follow until I'm in shin box position on the opposite side. Okay, so you can do this, as I said, free sitting or with your hands down behind you. So I usually like to do 2 or 3 of these on each side. And then I add some glute engagement. So what that means is using my glute or butt muscles to open through the hips. So once I've planted in my shin box position, I'm going to activate my glutes, come up nice and tall, get the hip all the way open. Again, I'm not going to extend through my back. I'm just going to keep that spine neutral. So I'm going to shift over to the opposite side, squeeze my glutes, and come up into that almost tall kneeling position. Or half kneeling, I guess, one. I'll just do one more on each side. And again, you will shift with this one, so make sure you have lots of space. Good. Another great drill for glute engagement and hip extension and for chest opening is called crab reach. So for that one, I'm going to get up nice and high on my sits bones. I'm going to bring my heels in so that my knees are bent about 90 degrees. We're going to do all our reps on one side followed by the other. So I'm going to plant my hand down behind me. I don't want it stacked right underneath my shoulder to begin with because I'm going to lift my hips up and back. So you probably want to go 6 to 12 inches, half a foot to a foot, behind your shoulder. I'm going to dig into my heels, squeeze my bum, lift my hips, and then reach overhead. My eyes are going to follow this top hand. I'm going to drop the hip down to the ground and then repeat. So again, in my end position, my shoulder should be stacked right over my wrist. This is good for chest opening, glute engagement, hip extension. And if you do it really quick, I'll make you out of breath too. Just make sure that your knees are not knocking together as you're coming up into your crab position. Good. And we'll repeat on the other side. Again, you want to make sure that you're getting your hips all the way open by squeezing your bum and you're not overarching through your low back. This is a combination of mobility and stability. Excellent. We're going to go into a half kneeling hip opener next. So your half kneeling position, back toes are tucked under. Again, if you have any tenderness in your knees, you can fold your mat under or fold up a towel and stack that underneath the knee just so you have a bit more cushioning. I'm going to squeeze my back bum cheek again to try and help turn off those hip flexor muscles. My rib cage is going to stay neutral, so I don't want to be arching through my low back. I'm going to hit 3 different positions. So I'm going to come straight forward with that front knee. I'm going to come over about 45 degrees and then close to 90. And we'll just do 3 sets on each side. Again, I'm staying nice and tall and long through the spine. And I'll just repeat on the opposite side here. So back toes tucked under, front knee 0, 45, and then about 90. Again, squeeze that back bum cheek. Try and get those hip flexor muscles to relax a little bit. From here, we're going to come up to standing. So we're going to do a drill for the muscles of the foot called the intrinsic muscles of the foot. So those are the muscles that don't cross the ankle. They just run from one point in the foot to another. Okay, and this is really good for activating some of the sensors that are in our feet, providing good feedback up towards the brain. We're going to build on this afterwards with a balancing hip drill. So this is a really good way to prime the system. So to start with, easier said than done. You're going to try and lift just your big toe on one side without lifting the other toes and without scooching them into the ground, okay? So you're going to lift just the big toe and hold. If you can do both at the same time, you can. Otherwise, do one at a time. You can do this seated as well. It's actually a little bit easier when you're not weight bearing. This is a really great one to practice while you're brushing your teeth or getting supper ready. Good, I'm just going to repeat on the other side. Lifting just that big toe. The first time I did this, it took me probably a solid 2 minutes to get my brain to connect with my big toe. So if you find that it's taking some time to get that connection, or if you're doing kind of like funny things with your hands while you're trying to, that's completely normal. Again, easier sitting than standing. If you're having a lot of trouble, what you can do is block the little toes so that you're not scooching them into the ground. And then you can practice lifting that big toe. But this is a really great drill to start activating the muscles of the bottom of the feet. And then you lift the lateral 4 toes without lifting the big toe. Notice I just did something with my hands there. Okay, and then we're going to try and activate the arch. So what you're going to see, again, I don't want to curl my toes under. I'm going to think about just lifting. For me, I feel that through my quads as well as I try to pull the arch or shorten my foot. They are called short foot exercises. Up towards the ceiling. And we'll just do the same thing on the opposite side here. Good. So the balancing hip drill that we're going to do is commonly called a hip airplane. So this is really good for training some of the side butt muscles or lateral rotators of the hip. Really great for people who are recovering or trying to recover from low back pain. Because if we can't control how our pelvis is moving, often that translates into aberrant movement through the low back. So if you want a block or even a foam roller to hang on to while you're doing this, that's completely fine. I'd rather see you hang on to something and move well through your hips than see you wobbling all over the place and kind of just holding on for dear life, for lack of a better term. So I'm going to come into a balancing stance. So I'm doing pretty well a single leg deadlift here. If I'm using a prop, I can have it just in front of me. The more weight that you put in the prop, the better. And I'm going to try and just move my pelvis around my hip bone. So I'm opening, that whole body is moving as one unit. You could even hang on to the back of a chair or a wall to do this. But the key is that you want to lock your pelvis to your rib cage so that everything moves as one unit. What we don't want to see is your hip moving or your lower body moving while your torso is still facing the ground. Okay, so we are trying to keep a neutral spine here. Good. In your end position there, you should be stacked, kind of pelvis over thigh. Okay, and we'll just repeat that on the other side. If your bum muscles are burning, you're doing it right. So foam roller. Again, I'm not going to hyperextend or lock the knee. We're just coming into sort of a soft bend, nice strong stance here, active foot. And we're rotating through that hip, turning that whole torso as one unit. Again, don't be surprised if you have more mobility or more control on one side versus the other, especially if you played a one-sided sport. Obviously, mine is the other side. Good. And then we'll just finish off with one more drill for the shoulders. So actively trying to find some range of motion through all the ranges. I'm going to start with my palms facing my side. I'm going to do one side at a time. Again, because we are dominant, one-hand dominant creatures, usually one shoulder is more flexible than the other. So nice and slow. I'm going to keep my rib cage neutral. I'm not going to let it flare. I'm going to try and come up until my bicep is in line with my ear. And then I'm going to flip my hand so palm faces away from me. And I'm going to nice and slowly come all the way around to complete a full circle. So we start with the palm facing the thigh. Rib cage stays neutral. Flip the palm when your elbow's in line with your ear. And come all the way around. Looks simple, but when you force yourself not to steal range through your mid-back, it becomes a lot more challenging. These exercises you could practice every day if you like, every other day, a couple times a week. You could do a lower body focus one day, upper body another. But all of this mobility work is going to be very beneficial. Having sufficient mobility through our joints also helps to make sure that we're in a good starting position. If we're doing prime movements like squats or a deadlift or a skill like throwing a ball, we want to make sure our joints are centrated when we're practicing our skill. So having adequate mobility is really an important facet of that as well. One last rep here. Excellent. So we've worked our way through the legs and the upper body, the extremities and the spine. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for joining me, and happy mobilizing.